Welcome to A Billion Realities. Here's your host, Jessica Gerlach. Welcome back to A Billion Realities. Today on the show we are talking to Elisa, who will share her intense journey through sexual assault, the loss of her brother, trauma, addiction, and the road to recovery. Hi, Elisa. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Hi. Welcome. Thanks for being on. So
I appreciate it.
Let's tell the audience. Yeah, thanks. So let's tell the audience where you're located. You're in Florida, right?
Yeah, I'm currently in the Tampa area.
Okay, awesome. So how's the situation down there?
I think it's pretty much like everywhere else. We just went under a mandatory quarantine thing starting at midnight, I guess, tomorrow night for 30 days. So self-quarantining like everybody else.
Exactly. I always like to check in just because of the current circumstances, obviously, where my different callers are from and how this is affecting them. But everybody in the U.S. seems pretty much the same thing. I mean, in Canada, too. So you have a really intense story to share with us today, and your journey is pretty phenomenal, especially with everything that happened to you and how you got through it and where you're at today, which is really the most incredible part of the story. So we're lucky because we have 3 hours. So we have a lot of time to kind of walk through it, which I'm really happy about because people don't understand how much a victim of trauma or assault or even after addiction, how much they actually go through, and all of the ups and downs along the way. But before we get into that, I would love to just ask you, so before any of this serious trauma happened to you, because we all have had certain types of traumas, but you've had severe ones, what was life like before you were assaulted?
Well, I think my journey was a little bit different than probably a lot of people. When I graduated high school in 2001, right after that, I went and moved myself to Philadelphia by myself. And originally I was going down to go to college. I was accepted into Temple University. So I did a year at Temple. And then I knew, from childhood that I wanted to go into the police department. So when I was 19, I walked through the police academy doors. And that's kind of where, I was 19 and I was a small town, I was from northeastern Pennsylvania, small town, Pike County, and that's where I grew up. And, I was born in Jersey. And then we moved to PA when I was young, at a young age. And I spent most of my life, in a small town. So going to the city was it was a culture shock from the door. So that's kind of where it went. So
yeah,
it was
that's
pretty
a pretty
normal.
big
I had a
move
good
to
life.
make alone. Okay, so that's good. So you knew what you wanted at a really young age, which a lot of people don't. So you were already driven and you had direction and ambition. So you had a really balanced life, it sounds like, very healthy, balanced life. So all of that's going really well for you, right? You're on the police force. Everything seems to be going well.
Well, it started right before that.
Okay, go ahead.
It started right.
Okay.
Well, okay, so I don't want people to think that it was just like this. I had like a Brady Bunch family situation, and like I had a lot of my father and I butt heads a lot. We had a lot of we're very much alike, and he was not on board with the police department thing. Like that was he was devastated. Yeah, he was devastated.
Wow. Okay. Why?
Yeah, like I think now that I'm 38 now, so I think I can look at it now as an adult and say that honestly it was probably the fear for me, for my life, for my safety. It wasn't like I was going to be a cop in a small town that had 3 traffic lights. I was going into the heart of a massive city where cops were getting killed left and right. And I think that fear is what drove a lot of that, a lot of the way he responded. But
that makes sense.
Once I graduated, he was okay.
Okay. Well, so once you graduated police academy, then he was okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So take us through the next few years, before or leading up to the assault situation. And I know that, there's a certain amount that you can share or can't share. That's up to you. But, just take us kind of through that process. Living on your own for the first time by yourself.
Okay. So basically, from the very beginning, I struggled. Okay, so even in the police academy, the odds were stacked against me from the start. And I don't know if a lot of people realize, but when you are a woman, and I'm Spanish and Italian, so I'm a minority, and being a woman and being a minority and going into a field where it is predominantly men, it puts a flag on you from the beginning. And I think because I was so young, I was probably pretty rebellious to authority. So, like, for an example, they were really big on PT, physical training, and I hated it. To me, the only time it mattered to me was when I had to pass the PT test. So I always felt like, okay, as long as I do that, it doesn't matter what I do before that, as long as I pass it when it matters. They saw it as me rebelling against authority. So from the very beginning, I guess I left a bad taste in their mouth from the jump. Because when I did pass the test, they actually, people in the academy stacked bets against me that I was going to flunk out. So when I didn't, yeah, it was bad. It was really bad. They tried every way possible to find a way to try to get me kicked out of the academy. But I didn't do anything wrong. I just didn't do what they asked. So
when
I
you
passed
didn't,
the test,
how did they react?
Oh God, they went through all my files and records to try to find ways to get me kicked out of the academy. These are the instructors. And when I didn't, it's crazy that the man that ended up sexually assaulting me, I met, was the head of the instructor of the police academy, and that's where I met him. And at the time, being 19, being naive, I took it as he saw something in me, and he thought, I saw me progressing, or he thought I would be a good police officer, and that's kind of how it played out in the beginning. And I was sadly mistaken. But so I get through the academy and I go through that, and it's I'm still trying to find myself because I'm young. I was really young, probably too young. And I make it through a lot of these trials and tribulations that I went through at that point. And finally, the day came where, they pinned our badge on my lapel, and I graduated the academy, and I went to work in my district. And in the beginning, for the first 6 months, I did well. It was great. I really didn't have any issues. And then I changed. I met a sergeant that had a significant amount of time on the job, and he kind of like, they were starting a tactical team, and he asked me to join that team. And it was unheard of at the time for someone with 6 months out of the academy to go into plain clothes. I didn't see that because I didn't know that life. I didn't know the time frame where people usually go into plain clothes and start doing undercover work or BD units, like burglary detail is what a BD unit is. I didn't know that was something that took years. And I thought, okay, great. He must think I'm a great cop. And it was completely the opposite. It was, this man was married. He was a sergeant. He was on the job for like 15 years at the time. And he started stalking me. And that's where this whole thing started. Yeah, this is where the ball started rolling.
So how did it progress, and how did you find out, like how long after he was stalking you and all that, did you find out that he was married and, obviously was just creeping on you, basically?
I knew immediately. I knew from the beginning. Like, he was angry that I would not agree to go out with him, to date him, to sleep with him. He started getting, basically it started in like, say, I want to say I went into the burglary detail in like June of 2000 June? Yeah. So I graduated January 2004 from the academy after it was 9 months. And then in June, I went into the plainclothes, and I went into his squad, basically. And then he started pretty slow making, it was like comments here and there, things that I was used to that weren't anything that was that invasive. But the more I shut him down, the more aggressive he became, to the point that, like, my parents would visit, and he would be sitting outside my house in his personal vehicle.
Wow.
And I had no choice but to. It got so bad that my life was in danger. Like, he stopped.
Wow.
He had officers. He was telling officers not to back me up on jobs because I was dead. I would not budge on, at one point in time, I remember he asked me if I would let him take pictures of me to send them to Playboy, like naked pictures. And I was like, number one, you're a supervisor, so that's no go on that. You're married, and I'm not into that. And I guess it was like an insult to his ego.
Yeah, it sounds like
he was
on a major power trip. Yeah, definitely. So at what point, so how long did that go on before something like an assault took place? How long did you endure that type of torture?
So this went on from June until August. In August was when I needed to get help. So in August is when I went to the person that I had met in the academy. And that's when that happened. When I went to him for help, that's how he sexually assaulted me.
Wow, that is unreal. So that happens to you, and how do you react in the moment, and how does this affect you right after? Because I know that type of trauma, it progresses in different ways. So what was your initial emotional reaction to that?
Initially, right after it happened, I was, as I was running out the door, I had called my mother immediately, and I was just devastated because, I don't think people understand, like, when a regular everyday civilian goes through something like a rape, an assault, sexual assault, anything, you call the police for help. But what happens when you are the police? And the police are the people supposed to protect you. They're doing it. Who do you go to? What do you do?
Unreal. Right. You must, you're completely stuck. So you called your mom. So when you called your mom, I'm sure she didn't know what to what to tell you to do either, right? Because like you said, these are the police and you are the police. So who do you turn to? And who did you turn to? What was the next step?
So after that happened, I knew at that point that it was either I made a decision and stood my ground, or this would continue to happen. So after like deliberating and having conversations with my family, my mom, my dad, basically, I made the decision to go and file it's called an EEOC complaint, which is an equal opportunity, basically a sexual harassment complaint against the sergeant. I knew when I was sexually assaulted, I knew that there was no way they would believe me if I opened up a case on two different.
Right.
So
wow.
I took it on. I took that on the chin, and I went and I told the unit that investigates this what the sergeant was doing to me, because it was dangerous on my life. Like I was not going to see the supervisor that sexually assaulted me. I was not going to see him frequently, but the sergeant that I worked under, I had to deal with every day. So it was like you have to kind of you kind of weigh it out. And I knew that my career would be over. And I didn't know honestly, like I played it as I went along because there's no manual for that.
Survival, really, right? It sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, my life was in danger. The sergeant went as far, when I came forward, he tried to have me set up. He paid someone to put narcotics in my trash can on the sidewalk. Internal Affairs opened a massive investigation that lasted over 2 years. They arrested me, and every single allegation was frivolous and false. And I was cleared from everything. Wow.
This is definitely not a story that you hear every day or an experience. This is really, really insane. I can't imagine the trauma, like layers of trauma, actually, from the first assault, let's say from the stalker to the assault to the setup. That must have felt like your world was just caving in. Like, I can't even imagine being able to cope with that. So how did this trauma progress over time? How did it show up in your life, in your emotions?
I think now that so much time has gone by, I can look at it objectively and kind of see where it started to fall apart. And I think at the time, because on that job, there's so much trauma surrounding the job as a whole, like between what you see every day, what you're dealing with, you're constantly dealing with people being killed. I've been shot at. I was hit by a car chased when somebody was wanted by the Secret Service. Like, so much stuff had went on that I kind of had like an emotional block where nothing affected me. Like, I had no emotion at all, which was probably the worst thing.
Wow.
It didn't really start to present in like an emotional standpoint until I dealt with, once I filed the complaint, it took about 3.5 years for them to come back with the completion of the investigation. And the sergeant was found guilty. He was found guilty by the city of 6 of the 8 allegations. The other 2 were inconclusive, which just meant it was my word against his. But there was about 19 other officers that testified on my behalf that witnessed things that this sergeant did to me. Yeah, it was a massive case.
So was that men and women witnesses?
Yes.
Or was it all women?
Both.
Okay, it was both. Okay.
No, men and women.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, because he wasn't
Not
shy
that
about
matters.
it.
I was just curious. What's that?
Yeah, no, I was surprised at how many officers had my back. Because when you're in that situation, you feel very alone. And I was isolated for a long time because when you file that kind of complaint as a police officer, you get blackballed. You get what's called red flagged. So I had to reprove myself after being on the job for almost 2.5, 3 years. I had to build my reputation again, that I wasn't just some female cop that didn't like my assignment and just decided that I was going to make some crazy allegation against the supervisor. And because, that happened in the past. Other officers, female officers, had done that in the past. So when I was moved out of the district away from him, the captain of the new district I was at told me from day one, I don't want you around any of my male officers. I don't trust you. So I spent 6 months watching prisoners in hospitals.
Wow.
And I was the one that was going through it was crazy.
Yeah. So what would you say that when the emotions did hit you regarding all of this, what were the thoughts and the range of emotions that took over your mind and your heart after the various traumas? When did it start catching up to you, and what did those thoughts look like?
Okay, so once the city found him guilty, he was demoted, and he was demoted from sergeant to a police officer. And he was suspended for 10 days. Now, here's the catch to that. Back in the day, and this has just recently started to change, but when you're a police officer, you're in a union. And when you are charged with something and you're demoted or you have action taken against you, you have the right to be arbitrated. And that's basically a panel of people that are in government that are basically paid pawns. So any cop that ever did anything wrong and went to arbitration always got their decision overturned. So in 2008, the end of 2008, after he had been demoted, the city gave him 10 days suspension with that demotion. Well, the rule book said that you can only give somebody 5 days. So because the city gave him 10 days and not 5, they gave him his position back as a supervisor. And then his friend was sent to the district I was in as a supervisor. And that's when the PTSD kicked in. That's when I was diagnosed with PTSD. Because that's when the anxiety kicked in, the horrible anxiety, paranoid, horrible insomnia, tremors.
Definitely. Yep. PTSD. Wow.
Nightmares. It got to the point that I was waking up throughout the night to make sure that I locked my door. I was counting the number of cars parked on the block.
Yeah.
Because it became, I was really I think I was just so traumatized by everything by that point that my body couldn't, you know what I mean? I couldn't process it mentally anymore. So it started
PTSD
coming
is
out.
No joke. Yeah.
It started coming out in really strange ways.
It does, because it's your subconscious trying to protect you from repeat trauma, right? So, yeah, PTSD is no joke. It's so serious, and if it's undiagnosed, it gets worse and worse. But so how were you diagnosed, and how did you know that you needed help?
So the anxiety started to become unmanageable for me. When I would go to work, I would physically get sick. And I think it was just because of the amount of stress and the amount of anxiety that I had, that my body could no longer physically cope with it. So it started coming out in physical manifestations. So I started getting I would vomit multiple times before I went in. I would have horrible migraines. It came out really quick and really hard. So basically I knew I had to kind of go talk to somebody, a therapist, and try to kind of work this out. And
Okay.
when I started going, I started going to therapy, and I was diagnosed with PTSD, major depression disorder, and severe anxiety disorder, and insomnia. So I was put on medications. Yeah, and that's how. Okay, so when I got put on medications, I had went in and I spoke to my supervisor, and I had just been put on new medication. So I was adjusting. My body was adjusting to it. So when I told him, I was like, can I work inside until my body adjusts to this medication? Because I have horrible anxiety and PTSD. Well, I was sent home that night, and then I received a call 2 days later telling me that I wasn't allowed to return to the police department.
Wow. Why?
Because they wanted me to be cleared medically by the city. And basically they made me they went through all my sick time, all my vacation time I had accrued, and they forced me to take a family medical leave of absence. So their doctors still hadn't cleared me. And the family medical leave of absence lasted for 6 months, and then I went for an extension, and it lasted another 6 months. So at the end of that 6 months, they wanted me to come back into work. Now, mind you, for that year, I'm not being paid.
Wow.
This wasn't paid. Yeah. So
that's brutal.
I bought my first house when I was 23. And I had a mortgage and everything. I was losing everything.
Oh my God.
So it got to the point a year later that I had no choice but to sell my house. So I sold my house, and they wanted me to come back into work, but my doctors hadn't cleared me, and their doctors hadn't cleared me. So because I didn't walk through the door for them to tell me to go home, they separated me from the department.
Unreal.
And that's when it really went downhill.
Okay, so that's when you emotionally declined the most.
Oh, I was broken.
So, obviously we can just guess what a bad day looks like, but can you describe for us what a really bad day looked like under those circumstances and what you were going through?
Yeah, okay, so I started partying a lot. I started drinking a lot. The depression became incredibly severe. And then it was a breaking point when I attempted suicide.
Do you feel that
I didn't want to live anymore?
So do you feel that that was a combination of, obviously, the trauma, that's for sure, but the combination of the trauma, obviously the PTSD really is all that aftermath of the trauma combined with substance use and just overall feeling depressed, and was it all of that together? Was that when it hit the breaking point? When you would
by
feel
that time,
suicidal?
Yeah, by that time I had almost 10 years on the job, and everything I ever knew and who I was were all gone.
Wow.
My life, my career, my home, my friends. I came back from Philly and went and moved back home with my parents. I went from having everything of my own, making $75,000 a year, to having nothing.
That's brutal. That is so brutal. And all at the hands of abusers, actually, and that's the saddest part. And these are people that should have conducted themselves with dignity, respect, and, given you safety. And that's unreal that you had to go through that. So, obviously we know what a bad day. At your worst, you were suicidal. And that's some heavy stuff right there.
I remember my mom and dad. My mom and dad were so afraid that I was going to kill myself that they removed all of the knives and the guns out of the house.
Wow.
And my mom walked in one day, and I was in such a low that I had insomnia horribly. So throughout the night, I had filled my walls with papers of things that I hated about myself, like all 4 of my walls.
Wow.
Like I didn't want to wake up. Like I really just, if I died that moment, I was okay with that, because I just didn't want to feel it anymore.
That's what I hear from people who reach that point, who are suicidal. They're just at the depths of despair, and they just don't want to feel that way anymore. They just want that pain to end. So how often would you feel suicidal, and like what would a good day look like if you had a good day? What would a good day look like?
A good day would have been making it through the day without crying, without nightmares, because I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep as it was, but when I did sleep, it was a constant replaying of all of the things that I went through, all the things that happened. And I couldn't wrap my head around starting over, because I didn't know who I was anymore. You know, everything that I thought I was gone. And I wasn't ready. I just wasn't ready to accept it. I wasn't able to accept it.
I mean, everything you went through with the abuse and being set up, that's all traumatic enough as it is. But then add to that the fact that everything that was familiar to you and everything you had worked for and set out to do and were ambitious to do was literally upside down, taken away, you know. And so, yeah, I bet after all the abuse and trauma and then that, it does, I can imagine it would leave you not at all knowing who you are. That's traumatic as well on its own.
It was. It was really rough. But I think, like, for a good day for me was just making it through the day. Like, I just wanted the next day to come, because I just couldn't.
Right.
Like, I didn't go, like, the partying, you know, after the suicide attempt, I kind of closed myself off completely to everyone. Like, I had no communication with anyone, and I barely spoke to my family. Like, I had nothing to give. I had no energy left. I had no emotion left. I was just broken. Like, the lowest you can be is where I was.
So how long did that last, that feeling?
That lasted from 2010 to, I want to say, 2012. Were really, really rough years.
Wow.
Yeah, it was rough. 2 years about. And then I kind of started to come out of it a little bit. And I went and I applied for a job, and I became a corrections officer. But I was never okay. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense. Like, it was just kind of like
you were.
It was like I was trying to fill a void in a way, like I couldn't be what I loved. So I tried
to going through the motion.
Compensate. Yeah, like I tried to compensate it with like going into the correctional aspect of it. But it's very different when you are an active police officer on the street and then you come from that and you try to go into a prison. It's like a glorified babysitting job. It's horrible.
I can see that. Yeah, that makes sense. So
it was brutal.
The 2 years that you were suffering, obviously so badly in the depths of despair, literally. That's a long time. I'm shocked. That's a long time. What type of help were you getting during that time frame? Were you getting professional help
None.
or counseling? Okay, so this is where
I shut down.
Okay. So what were some of the strategies, since you weren't getting professional help, that you were using to cope with these traumas, these feelings? You know, what were the things that you were doing?
Alcohol.
Okay.
And the crazy thing is, I don't even like to drink. But back then, I hadn't stepped into the drug situation yet. And that came after. That came a little later. But during that time, I started, you know, I know, like, a lot of people that I knew were taking, like, pills and shit. So I would, like, take a pill here and there. I wasn't heavy into that yet. And about 8 months into being a correctional officer, I went down a flight of steps in the jail. And I had a really nasty injury to my back and my knee. And because of that, I had herniated discs and a collapsed disc in my back, in my lower back. So I was put on oxycodones. Oh, well, it was oxy.
Wow.
It was not Percocets. They were like Roxys, which were like straight opioids. And I was put on about 220 milligrams a day for like 2 years.
Wow.
And that's where that, and in that time period, I had been in a relationship, and the guy I was dating at the time ended up like getting a heroin addiction. So
was he taking pills first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of, and
common.
so that kind of threw me into that. So I went from getting hurt, being on pain medication, to heroin addiction.
You know,
and I lost a child right before that.
Oh, wow. So you had
I lost a
miscarriage.
child. Yeah, I lost a child, and then 3 days later, it's the first time I did heroin.
Wow. But you were already addicted to the pills, right? So the heroin was almost like a replacement?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's where it kind of, and honestly, I guess that's kind of how it was. Yeah, I guess it replaced it in a way.
Yeah, a lot of people that are listening to this probably know that I'm heavily involved in the opioid crisis. It's just really common how many people start out taking pills, and even if they stop, they eventually somehow end up doing heroin because it's that same feeling that they got used to, which is a total escape, right? And so, another trauma that you had gone through, you lost a child. You know, it's crazy because opiates are addictive within a few days, and we know that now. But the medical community
back then it didn't. They didn't tell us back then.
No, they did not know. And like I've had a physician come up on stage and tell the audience, you know, the whole medical community was misled like 20, 30 years ago. We were told that opiates were a less than 1% chance of addiction, and he said, and we now know it's a 100% chance of addiction. And, you know, it can happen literally within a few days. So you have a lot of young people and kids who are just completely misled or uneducated about that, because how could they not be misled when the whole medical community was misled? So a lot of people did fall into that, and you know, I'm sorry to hear that you did, and I do feel that I have to say, you know better than anybody, but I'm sure being on opiates for, you know, how long did you say, 2 years?
Oh, God. What, before I got clean?
No, when you were prescribed.
Oh.
When you were.
Yeah, about 2 years.
That's a crazy, unbelievably long time for a doctor to prescribe opiates. Of course you were addicted.
It may have been 3. It may have been closer to 3, because honestly, I was on pills longer than I was on heroin.
Oh, wow. I've heard that before too, you know. So let me ask you this. Were there times before the heroin or the pills that you used certain types of tools that you found that were helpful to you to get through the day? On a good day, that you did get through the day without feeling suicidal? Was there anything that helped you?
Yeah, I want to say, like, okay, so the suicidal thoughts, once I started working again, and I went into the corrections, kind of dissipated as time went on. And then I don't know if not everybody has had an addiction to opiates, but for the people that have, they understand this, where when you are addicted to opiates, you emotionally have no feeling, nothing. So you're not happy, you're not sad, you're just okay.
Oh,
So
I didn't know that. I've never heard that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, when for some reason, because of how it attaches to the receptors in the brain, it creates the endorphins that your body naturally makes when you're happy. So someone that has depression, that has PTSD, my levels of endorphins and serotonin are naturally depleted and don't make the amount that someone that is not addicted would have. So
the balance is thrown off. Okay.
Right. So so when I was on pills, I felt normal. And then I was on pills for so long that I didn't know what normal was without them. And that's where that line got crossed. Because I forgot what it was like to be normal.
I bet.
Like
you change your brain chemicals. Wow.
Yeah, everything. Like from even like your taste buds, your sense of smell, your sense of like sensation of touch are all depleted tremendously when you're on opiates. Like you really are just there. You're not suicidal. Not everybody. I mean, I guess some people are when they're struggling, but typically when someone's high, they're not suicidal. It's not until they start to come down or go through withdrawal that they become suicidal.
That's right.
And that's why.
From addicts. Yep. Absolutely. They can't handle.
Yeah.
Yeah. They can't handle the reality.
And the opioids. And just so, like, I just want people to understand how this works chemically. When you are an opioid addict, when you're addicted to opioids, your receptors stop producing serotonin, and I think it's serotonin and like endorphins. So
and
the opioid, right, it binds to the receptors and it tricks your brain to believe that your body created enough endorphins and dopamine to sustain itself, when in actuality it has created nothing, which is why when you are going through withdrawal or you're coming down from being high, the depression and the suicidal thoughts become so intense, because now your body, that's why all the body aches, the sickness, it's because your body has no endorphins at all.
Wow.
So that's why people have to go use it again so that they aren't sick.
Absolutely.
And it's a game.
So they don't feel pain.
It's like a circle.
So, yeah.
Right. They don't feel anything. You feel nothing.
The depression. So I work with, I've been in touch with a few different people who deal with addiction and suicide. And the one guy, he has 2 nonprofits, but they have a house for addicts and people who are suicidal. And it's so closely related. It's unbelievable. Like, literally hand in hand, and just from, so doing this type of work, like I've learned so much, right? And obviously these guys, they have homes for addicts, and they give addicts and people who are suicidal like a family unit, because a lot of these people are lacking an emotional connection, and that's the insatiable void that they're trying to fill with a drug, or, you know what I mean? So anyway, it was just interesting, and we're on the topic now of addiction and suicide, and I feel like I didn't realize personally myself how closely and interconnected it actually is. And just like you said, once those drugs wear off, you're not only left with all the bad feelings that you had before you started using, but now you have all the guilt and the shame and the remorse and all of these lower vibrational feelings and energies of being an addict as well. So it's like everything just comes crashing down on you, and it just perpetuates the feeling of actually wanting to die, and it's a vicious cycle. So I can just imagine how bad that was for you now in active addiction after everything else that you had already gone through. So let me take you, let's go back to this for a second. So you are now a correctional officer, and you end up falling and getting hurt. So you're on the pills for a couple of years, however long it was, 2-3 years.
Right.
And then you end up doing heroin because obviously your boyfriend has it right there, and it's pretty much the same feeling as the pill. So what happened to you in your career as a correctional officer once you started using heroin?
Well, I had already, I was on workman's comp for a while, and I had already, I had decided to settle out with the city, and because I didn't, honestly, I was so done with law enforcement in general that unless I was going to be a cop, I didn't want no part of it. So I had to make a decision of what I was going to do. And I decided that in the midst of all of this happening and being on pills, I moved to Virginia Beach with my sister for 2.5 years. That whole time, I'm on pills, like on that 200 and something milligrams plus a day. Now, I separated myself from the guy I was with at the time because I knew where that was going to go. Like something in me still knew that it was only going to get worse if I stayed.
Wow.
So I had to figure out how to kind of veer off this path in a way that I wasn't going to end up dead. So I left. I did the only thing I knew how to do. Left.
So,
and
how long into your addiction? You know, how far into your addiction, I should say, did you leave that job? So, what I mean is, how long were you at that job?
I was at the job. I was only a correctional officer for I think a month shy of a year before I left.
Okay.
So when I was in the correctional facility, I wasn't addicted yet.
Ah, okay. Because I was wondering how you would function. But I know
it didn't happen until the
functional
injury.
addicts.
They're not functional. That's a lie. It's such a lie.
I mean,
you can't be functional on heroin.
No, but I've seen people who can hide it better than others.
Oh, yeah.
I should say. You know.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it really depends on the job that you're in.
That's true. That's why I was so curious, how long after you got injured. So was the injury kind of the turning point where you're like, okay, I'm going to leave this job anyway because
yes.
I'm okay.
Yeah.
So you're injured.
Yeah, I was done. I was done.
Okay.
So that's when it happened after that. So once I left the job, I never went back.
Okay. I see. And so let's talk about your addiction. I'm sure that wasn't good for your relationship, of course, right? But how long would?
I left that day. The day that I left, I never spoke to him again.
Wow. That's crazy.
I didn't speak to him again for 4 years. Like, I didn't have a conversation with him again for about 4 years. Yeah.
And
I
why
had
was
so
that?
much of my own. I was just so much in my own situation and my own mess that I didn't. When you're on drugs like that, you're not in any position to be in any kind of relationship because you don't have those emotions.
Understandable.
You know what I mean? Like I didn't have that connection, that emotion. I didn't even have the desire to be in a relationship because that was my concern. Like getting high was my concern.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense. You couldn't even really be in it. You couldn't feel anything.
And typically when you're using
long...
in a relationship, you're both using. You know what I mean? Like it's a very destructive path.
I've seen that, it's very, very common, more common than not.
Yeah, Yeah, it's codependency. You're codependent on your addictions. And I didn't want that responsibility. You know what I mean? Like I didn't want to have to worry about where he was getting drugs because I needed to worry about where I was getting them.
That is so common from talking to other addicts. Like I've heard of couples hiding how much they have so that they don't have to share it with their wife or husband or boyfriend or
Yeah.
girlfriend. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
and I didn't want to
yeah,
do that. Like, I was that selfish.
there's no concern for the other person on both ends, so it,
Right.
it makes
You know,
sense. Yeah, yeah.
and that was where I was at with the relationship standpoint. Like, I just didn't want any part of it.
So, how long were you doing heroin, and what did that look like?
Jeez. So I did heroin. Believe it or not, like I said, I did pills longer than I did heroin. I was, for some reason, listen, God, and I'll say this, God has blessed me, because through all of this, up until I've been clean now 4 years. I only had one relapse in that 4-year time, and up until that one relapse, I had never shot dope.
Wow.
I only snorted dope, and okay. I've only, honestly, being real, I've only shot dope a very few, I can count on one hand the times that I've shot dope.
Okay.
That was never my thing. I don't know, it grosses me out. Now I get it, and I know, and I was lucky, because most people that shoot dope can't go back to snorting anything. Everything from that point on is intravenous.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because the effect is not the same. It
doesn't
go right into your
totally
bloodstream
different
when you sniff it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's totally different. And for some reason, for like the grace of God, and to me.
Yeah.
Like, I
you were
can count on one hand.
Protected. Wow.
Yeah.
Definitely
and
protected
honestly,
in that way.
Yeah, I was blessed. And honestly, I would have never relapsed had I not been around someone I knew better. Like, I was clean for like two and a half years, and then I made one decision to involve myself with somebody I had no business being involved with, because he was garbage. And that choice threw my whole life upside down for like a couple weeks until I snapped out of it.
That is a big message right now.
Yeah. Honestly,
for our audience.
And I'll tell anybody, if you are clean, please do not think that you are a superhero or going to help anybody, because up until the moment that I relapsed, if you told me that I was going to do that, I would have said you were out of your mind.
Yep.
It has such a huge impact on who you are, who you surround yourself with. If you surround yourself with addicts, that's what's going to happen, you know?
I've said this multiple times, and then, some people take offense to it. Like, everybody deserves to be loved. No. You can love somebody from afar, but it doesn't mean you need to have them in your life. It doesn't mean you hate them just because you don't accept them into your life. Unfortunately, you had to learn it the hard way. I've had to learn it the hard way in other ways.
Right.
But I have learned, I have had to realize, that there's certain types of lower vibrational or unevolved mentalities or energies, that I cannot be around, because guess what? The bad apple is going to spoil all the other apples around it, and unfortunately, that's just a reality, because energy is real.
It's like a fungus. It is. It's like a fungus. If you leave vegetables next to each other and one gets mold, in enough time, you're going to have mold on everything.
That's it, So one bad apple really does spoil the bunch, just like our grandmother said. It's not bullshit.
No, it's
real.
not. It's real.
For real, Grandma.
It's real.
Yeah.
And so I'll tell you what, honestly, like, to this day, I regret. That's one of the very few things I regret. And I don't have a lot of things I regret, because everything I've been through taught me something.
Right.
But I knew better. You know what I mean? Like, I knew in my heart, I knew better. And I still gave the benefit of the doubt. And because of that decision, it changed my whole life. And I was so lucky that I had the support system and the family that I have, or else I would still be sitting in that position.
Well, I feel like it's terrible that you had to go through it, obviously, any of it. But, now you're out sharing your message, and people seem to think that they're strong enough to be around it and that they'll never go back because they've been clean for so long. But you're able to share that message and say, yeah, because guess what? Just like you said, it takes 1 week moment, just one moment.
Yep. One.
And so,
One.
yeah, and we're only human. And so, of course, we're going to have weak moments throughout the day, throughout the hour. I mean, so, yeah, it can happen to anyone. And relapse is so common. And honestly, like who you surround yourself with, they're more influential than you may even give them credit for, especially if you're like you're a very headstrong person. You're very like alpha female, and I can relate to that. So we think that something like that can't happen to us, but
absolutely,
as we have experiences like that and life goes on, we also acknowledge where our weaknesses are, and we have to make those mistakes in order to understand that, well, yeah, we can still be affected by the people around us. But so
I want to real quick jump back to something though.
So
when I started to get clean, so in 2016, it got to a point that the addiction was so bad that, honestly, like I overdosed. This was before Narcan came out, and someone was with me and able to kind of like get me, like bring my adrenaline up. And pull me up. So that happened. And then at that point, like my parents did like an intervention on me. I think it was like they knew, like either she's gonna die, and I probably would have. And I was okay with that.
Right.
Yeah, I was okay with that.
Oh, wow.
And that's and that's a lot of that had to do with the trauma that I went through. Like I just was so mentally and emotionally drained and exhausted of just trying to fuel the addiction, trying to cope with losing everything I ever knew, trying to rebuild something I didn't even know what I was rebuilding because I didn't know where to start or who I was. So my parents kind of kidnapped me in a way, and they brought me to Florida for the first time.
They had to.
And
okay.
Yeah, they had to. So they kidnapped me, and they brought me to Florida, and they set up something with this doctor, and honestly, as God is my witness, this doctor saved my life, and I give him so much credit, and God rest his soul, because 2 years ago, I came back down to Florida to visit him, and right after I left, he passed away from a massive heart attack. But this man didn't know me from a can of paint, and he spent 2.5 hours on the phone with me the night before I went into detox, because I had all the same fears that everyone else has. Like, I didn't want to go through the sickness. Like, I knew what that sickness was, and this is when not a lot of people knew about Suboxone, and that's what I used. I used Suboxone to get clean, and I was on Suboxone for a long time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was on Suboxone for like 3 years. I just got off of Suboxone fully, like 6 months ago, I want to say.
Yeah, I know a lot of people that have been on it for a very long time too.
Right. And I hate people that say people that are on Suboxone are not clean, because it's a goddamn lie. You may be, I know people say, oh, it's a pharmaceutical heroin. I understand the concept, why they're saying that, but I'll tell you this. I spent 3 years on Suboxone, didn't use heroin, didn't overdose, didn't abuse Suboxone, got my life together, got a job, wasn't a dysfunctional mess, wasn't unproductive. It's a completely different thing if I was using Suboxone and had the effects of heroin. You know what I mean? Like, that's different.
Absolutely. How can there's no comparison if you got your life together and you're not
right.
I'm with you on that 100%. And honestly,
and if that helps people,
yeah.
You know,
and
like if that
keeps
someone
road.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. And I hate people that are ashamed of that, or that feel like that if they're on Suboxone that they're not really clean. Like, who are you proving it to? Who? Because if you're
Exactly.
not out in these streets, you know what I mean, and parents aren't getting a phone call that their child is dead because they
Of
overdosed on
course.
fentanyl, then
Exactly.
if you have to use Suboxone, so be it.
I
Like
fully agree
Subutex,
with you.
Suboxone, whatever.
There's not only
Methadone, I
one
feel a
path
little
to
different about.
recovery.
I don't
I
feel that
do
way. I
think
feel a little different
methadone.
about methadone with that. Yeah.
I do too. It's funny that we agree on this, but I'm
and the
not
reason
completely
is because of
judgmental.
what it is.
I agree with you, and I do feel that it does create an environment and kind of a scenario where they're going to get high, kind of.
Right.
But at the same time,
it's a holdover. Methadone is a holdover.
But at the same time, again, I'm not completely judgmental about that either, because if that helps them
I'm
to
not either.
wean eventually off of the heroin and not be in the streets and putting themselves and other people's lives in danger from all this crazy shit that addicts end up doing because they're high or they need drugs, then it's like,
absolutely,
so be it, because that's the better option. And
Suboxone
is even
like,
yeah. No,
I'm
Suboxone
just gonna say,
is
like,
even
as
a
far
lot
as
gentler.
Right. And I'm going to say, like, I think one important thing that people that are trying to get clean have to understand, if you do not approach and try and start to heal the mental parts of the addiction, is not just physical. Something
Absolutely.
somewhere along the way happened. Some trauma somewhere happened. And unless you start to heal and forgive yourself and go down those roads and open those doors again to heal, you're never going to be able to become clean, because something is always going to pull you back.
Yes, and I'm a huge, huge believer and advocate about healing traumas.
Mental health is such a big deal.
It is, and not just with addiction, but with PTSD, with addiction, like with abuse, any of that. It's so important to heal the trauma, which is why I do hypnosis and neurolinguistic programming, and that's why I became trained in that and certified so that I could help people with their traumas. Because when you're not fixing what's going on in the subconscious, which rules 95% of your day and your habits and your addictions and your decisions, then you're really not being effective with it, because it's actually all happening in the subconscious. So I love that you said that.
And something will trigger it.
Yeah, of course. And there's so many triggers. To an unhealed person, everything can be a trigger, you know?
Absolutely.
But to a healed person, we can be aware and say, oh, well, that used to be a trigger, or that can be a trigger for me, so here's how I'm going to cope with it. So awareness is like key. So how did you become aware of your emotional trauma, and how did you start dealing with yours?
I think that, so when I was brought to Florida for detox, a part of and this is why I'm an advocate about Suboxone specifically and Subutex, because in those programs, those are programs. You have to be in counseling. You have to be drug tested. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like methadone where you can go every day and go get a glass of methadone and go get high and then go the next day and get a glass of methadone. Like, it doesn't work that way. You have to be clean. You cannot have drugs in your system while you're on the Suboxone program. I mean, people have relapsed and they don't throw you out for that, but you have to have treatment. Like, mental health is a huge part of that program. So when I went into that program, prior to that, I was completely closed off to any kind of therapy, any kind of help as far as that, because I always felt like, what are you going to tell me that I don't know about myself? Like, I'm the biggest judgment and I'm the biggest critic of myself. I know who I am. I know what I am. And there's nothing you're going to tell me that I don't know. What I didn't know was patterns, and why was I doing what I was doing? Like, what was it? What was the underlying issues that I had? You know, and a lot of that was the emotional trauma of the sexual assault, losing everything I had, not being who I was, not knowing who I was anymore, all of those things I had to confront. And it took years. It doesn't happen overnight.
It's a lot to go through.
Time. Yeah, it's a lot. And trust me, there's a lot of doors I didn't want to open again. Like, I didn't want to relive the trauma I went through. No, who in their right mind, wants to open those boxes of cans of worm again? Nobody.
It's funny that you say that, though, because we don't want to, but we don't realize is that every time we're triggered, every time something reminds us of a feeling of something traumatic that we went through, we will actually relive it emotionally. And the neurotransmitters in the brain send signals that do that. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's so important that you went to therapy to literally rewire your brain.
Yeah. And honestly, it took a long time to learn these things about myself and about mental health. And a lot of people don't understand that with PTSD in particular. When you're triggered by something with PTSD, your brain releases the exact same amount, exact same chemicals it did when you were going through the trauma.
Oh,
so
you glad you're saying this.
Yeah. So you get the identical, whatever was your worst situation, whatever caused that PTSD, when you get triggered, you are reliving that trauma in that moment again as exactly and identical as it happened on the day it happened.
And you know what else I've read is that you relive that plus the new trauma. So if you get re-abused, you're not only living the same level of emotional trauma from the first one and relive it exactly like that, but even more so because of the new trauma that's being done. If you are experiencing an actual new trauma and it's not just a trigger, but abuse after a trauma is like living it double. You know, it's unreal. I had PTSD, so I can absolutely relate to it. And I love that you're telling people that. I do, and that's part of the reason why it's such a huge part of my show and the concept. I mean, it's obviously so interconnected with abuse and addiction and, you know, all of it. So, yeah. So, okay, tell us more about that because I'm so excited for people to understand more about PTSD.
Yeah. Okay, so if you ask any addict, 9 out of 10 addicts at some point in their life sustained some kind of trauma, whether it's parent, whether it's sexual, whether it's physical abuse, whether it was emotional abuse. There was something as they grew up when their brain wasn't fully developed, became a ticking time bomb. And until you confront those things and you understand them and understand why they're happening and what happened and accept them, you can't let them go.
Yeah.
And that was a huge part of my recovery, was going back and am I completely healed today? No. Will I ever be? Like, the one thing I remember the doctor that saved my life told me, and it was like the silliest metaphor, but it made so much sense. He said to me, when you're born and you grow up, you're a cucumber. And when you become an addict, you become a pickle. You could never go back to being a cucumber. You're always going to be a pickle.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that analogy
and as silly
before.
as silly as that sounds, is real. Like, you're never going to be who you were before you were an addict. Mm-hmm. But if you, and I will say this to people too, when you are trying to get clean, it doesn't happen on the first time, the second time. Sometimes it takes people 20 times. You know, it took me multiple tries of getting clean before I actually made it, before I actually, began to have significant clean time. You know, it doesn't happen overnight. And there's a lot of judgment that comes with addiction. And you will have to mend relationships and trust issues for years to come after. Like
Absolutely.
a lot of people, you know, there was a lot of damage done, say, with their families, their parents, their significant others. They don't trust them anymore. And you have to rebuild those relationships. And it is frustrating because for a long time after, you know, when I had a year clean or 2 years clean, you know, my parents would still, and my family members and people that were close to me would still, you know, have like be suspicious of certain things or think that they saw similar patterns, even if I wasn't doing it. And it was so frustrating.
I've had addicts steal from me who I was very close to, and at the time, I wasn't too upset because I knew why, and I understood enough about psychology and addiction to understand it, even though it was still upsetting. But, yeah, it does take time to build that back, and that's not easy. And it's frustrating for the addict once the addict is, like, better and clean.
Right.
And
you're like, okay, I'm not doing that anymore.
Yeah, but the other people are like, well, how do I know? You know,
right.
So
or you know, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And it's tough, you know, and that is a whole other healing process, because the stigma that comes with an addict really will never go away. So you have to just accept who you are, understand who you are, and be okay with who you are. You have to forgive yourself before anything. You can't mend relationships. You know what I mean? Like, you can't fix all the broken things until you are ready to forgive yourself for what you did. Because believe me when I tell you, there is no addict that I know, and I've known a lot of addicts, there is no addict I've ever met that completely has forgave themselves for the damage that they've caused other people, to themselves, to their children. You know, it's a lot of healing. And it takes a lot. It takes time, and it's work. It's not easy.
I feel it's continuous work. Like you said, I'm close to so many addicts, and, you know, I've had my own issues, not with that particular issue, but after I had PTSD. So I understand how closely addiction and PTSD are related. Opiates were not my problem, but yeah, it's just difficult all around, and building those relationships back for people who were in that heavy active addiction where they were stealing from their family because they were desperate to get high and they didn't want to feel sick and they didn't want to feel depressed.
And they were embarrassed.
And then having to forgive yourself, like you said, after that, once you're not high anymore or fiending, you know, for the sickness to go away or the depression, you know, when you're just actively looking for some money for drugs, when you're not in that zone anymore, you look back and you're like, I've seen this happen with my close loved ones who struggled with it, and it's almost like they look at it like, I don't even feel like that was me, because it wasn't.
Right.
It wasn't. You know, unfortunately, right. It takes
over.
It
was a shell. Yeah, it was a shell of a person.
A shell of you, exactly. So, yeah, it's definitely something that's very, very difficult to live with, you know, with yourself and what you did to others, and it must be really, really difficult. So how many years did you go through this type of therapy until you felt what you would call strong again?
Okay, so when I first started getting clean, a year into being clean, I had another horrific trauma. And so on September 18th of 2017, my older brother died in my arms from a drug overdose.
Oh, my God.
And that was a really, like, I tell people now when I don't really discuss it often, but when I do, I tell people that, like, part of me died that day with him. And there was moments in that time period when that happened that I it went through my head so many times to go get high. Like, I never had cravings to get high the way I did when that happened.
Wow.
And as crazy as that sounds, like, people would say, well, why would you want to go get high if your brother just died from getting high? I didn't want to get high because I wanted to be high. I wanted to get high because the pain was so deep, like nothing I had ever felt in my life, that I didn't know how to function. I didn't know how to cope with it. And and that day, two things happened. He passed away, and my mother, for the first time in my life, I saw my mother collapse. And she said, I'm going to have to bury both of my children. Because she knew in that moment when he died that everything I worked for was dying with him. Because I didn't know how. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know how to, like, he was my best friend.
Can't even imagine.
So yeah, like, he was my best
tragedy.
friend. And I never wanted to get high as bad as that day.
And you still didn't, right? You still didn't.
No, I didn't.
Wow.
I actually upped the doctors up my Suboxone for that.
Okay.
They raised the dose of my Suboxone.
How did you manage to not go back to it at a time like that?
So how, like, my thought process is probably different than a lot of people. I find solace in myself. So I close myself off. Like, I shut down. I'm not a person that, when I'm going through shit, like, I'm not a person that's going to call people and talk about it. I'm not going to go on Facebook and post, like, serious shit. You know, you're not going to ever see something on Facebook where I'm like, you know what I mean, like, for attention. Like, I don't want that. I don't want sympathy. I don't want pity. I need to be alone in my own thoughts. And I pretty much locked myself. Yeah, I locked myself in my house for like 3 months. And I just didn't go out because I knew I was so vulnerable to it, and I knew it wouldn't take much. Like, I knew.
For sure.
And we know, as addicts, we know. You know what I mean? Like, when you're going through that and you're starting to get that itch, you know. You might not want to admit it, but you know.
Yeah.
And I knew.
Feeling, right?
Yeah, I knew. And I knew if the opportunity presented itself, that I would have been off to the races, 100%.
Yeah.
And I also knew that my mother would not be able to survive that. So it was like
I was going to
ask
you if it was, I was actually going to ask you if that she was part of the reason why you knew that you couldn't allow her to go through that a second time.
Yeah, because he wasn't in the grave a month and a half. And I knew at this point, this is when fentanyl started to become a lot heavier. And the chances of you getting a fentanyl bag were like, it was like an 80-20%. You know, it was like 80% fentanyl, like 20% dope.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? Like, it was inevitable that it was going to probably be something with fentanyl. And I knew by how I was from that once I started that, I probably wasn't going to stop because I didn't want to feel that pain. Like, that pain was like nothing I ever experienced in my life, and to this day. And I don't think I'll ever experience it again, other than, God forbid, the day that I lose my parents.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, so I there's not a trauma that I can equate to losing a sibling at a young age. My brother was only 46. You know, he was still extremely young. And he was in a coma. he was put in a coma he wasn't put in. He was in a coma from the overdose for a good month before the ventilator was shut off.
Wow.
And yeah, you know what I mean? And then like I was in the room and my mother was there, and I have two older brothers, the one that's passed away and my eldest brother. He was with me, and I knew my brother was taking his last breath before anybody else. And we had a very special, very close relationship that it was to the point it was like a nonverbal kind of relationship. Like we knew. He didn't have to say anything for me to know what he was thinking.
Right.
And
Wow.
I knew. I went, and it's crazy because I'll tell you that what happened. And it's crazy because I have very strong faith in God. That's not everybody's thing, and I get it. I don't judge
as well. So, yep, me too.
You know what I mean?
To each their
but
own.
I will say, I'll tell you what happened, and then you can make up your own decision. But it was about 1 a.m. and my niece, I have a niece that's at the time she was 24, and she was there with us, and it was myself, my mother, my sister, and my brother, and then my brother that was in the coma. And it was about 1 a.m., and I wanted to go downstairs and outside to have a cigarette. So I was taking my niece with me to go down. And I got in the hallway. I walked out of his door, and I went into the hallway, and I started to walk down the hallway to go to the elevator. And for some reason, I stopped, and I told my niece, I said, wait, I have to go back inside for a minute. And I went back in the room, and I put my hand on his hand and my other hand on his wrist. And for some reason, something said to me, find his pulse. And I couldn't find his pulse. And he was still breathing on the ventilator. They had taken him off the ventilator 12 hours prior to that. And he was still breathing on his own, incredibly shallow. And I could still see his chest rise, but really not very frequently. And I can see like his skin tone started to turn like an ashy gray. And I looked at him, and my niece came up on the side of me where I was standing next to the bed, and I leaned over to her and I said, can you feel his pulse, because I can't find it? And she started feeling his arm. And my sister was asleep on a chair at the end of the bed. And I was looking at my brother where his head was on the pillow. My niece was on my right side, and like I was saying, I was telling her that. And then as I turned to her and I was saying I can't feel his pulse, and she started feeling his wrist. And as that happened, I felt like, when somebody comes and they lean on your shoulder, like put their hands on your shoulder and lean like body weight on your shoulder?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I felt that. So I turned around to tell my sister, who I knew was at the end of the bed, that I couldn't find his pulse. And she was still sleeping. She was still sleeping at the end of the bed. There was nobody there.
Wow. Oh, I got chills.
30 seconds later, his heart stopped.
Unreal.
I knew at that moment, when I felt that his soul had already left his body. And that he wasn't there anymore.
Again. Yeah, you just knew. You feel it.
And I knew. And I collapsed. And the nurse ran in the room, and he was gone. After that, I kind of went back into a dark place with myself. And even though I knew that his soul moved on, and I knew he wasn't here anymore, I knew I would see him again one day, someday. But I couldn't, my brain could not comprehend never hearing his voice again, never seeing him again. Like, I didn't know how to function with that. Like, I didn't know how I was ever going to get past that or be okay. And even though it's been 3 years, it still feels like yesterday. And there's just some pain that runs so deep, you never heal from it. You just learn to live with it. It never gets better.
Wow.
And I knew if I went down that road and I got back into addiction and I started using again, I knew I would die. And I knew that my mother would never survive burying me. She barely survived my brother. And she still isn't right. And she'll never be okay. Any parent that buries a child, there's a pain that it's incomprehensible.
The worst tragedy, nightmare that can exist for a parent.
Yeah. It's just unnatural.
Absolutely. Absolutely unnatural. Just completely
I knew she
tragic.
wouldn't handle that. Yeah, she wouldn't be able to survive that. She would die. So I had to, for once in my life, I had to decide how selfish I was going to be. Was I going to stop my own pain, or was I going to destroy my mother beyond any kind of recovery? She would never recover from that.
Right.
And now that he was gone, you know, I'm the youngest. I'm her baby girl. Our relationship is like we're thick as thieves. For the first time, I think, in my adult life, I had to put my love for my mom before my love for myself. And I was okay with that. And if it meant that I had to wake up every day and feel that agony to save her from having to bury me, then so be it.
I feel like that is definitely something that saved you, unfortunately, but it kept you putting her first so that she wouldn't have to go through it again, but it kept you clean after that.
It saved my life too. Now, like I said, I had one relapse after that, and it lasted for like 3 days. And it was the worst decision I ever made. And I snapped out of that super quick and got right back on track. And like I said, I think my brother is an angel for me. I think that a part of him is why I was able to, and my faith in God, and honestly, my faith in myself, because as I got stronger over the years and the more clean time I had, the more I knew I could do it. And I knew that if I wanted it bad enough, that there wasn't anything that I couldn't do. So I just took that pain and I turned it into motivation.
Wow.
And that's how I came out of that.
So it's funny because, not funny, ironic, because one of my questions for you before going into this was, do you agree that sometimes experiencing tragedies can lead to getting help just as some can lead to addiction? Kind of like that double-edged sword. So basically turning the pain into, the strength.
Yeah. I do, because, I mean, honestly, if you would have asked me that question before I went through the things I went through, I don't know if I would understand it. But
you wouldn't have had the insight.
Right. I didn't live through it. So now that I've lived through what I have, had he not died and had I not watched him die and went through what I went through, I don't know if I would have the motivation that I have to stay clean.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that fueled that fire for me.
I can definitely understand that. And I'm sure other people who have gone through what you have can relate. Unfortunately, sometimes it does have the opposite effect. It
It does.
sometimes does lead others down the path of addiction again because they can't handle their emotions and they can't cope, right? So, but you putting your mother at the forefront of, she was a priority. You were like, I'm not letting this happen to her again, and I refuse to go down that road and have to, have her suffer in that way. So since you went through that, which I'm sure you still go through that, like you said, it never really goes away. But what are some of the healthy alternatives or replacements or additions have you absorbed into your life now that keep you on the right track?
So the one thing I learned through a lot of the therapy and things that I went to, treatment, things like that, were that idle hands are the devil's playground. Like,
Yep.
you have to find something you're passionate about to fill the time, because when you're just coming into recovery and you're just starting out in recovery, you have so many vulnerable moments that you have to find ways to fill that time to distract yourself. Because when you start to sit and idle and think is when you start to conjure up schemes and plans.
Definitely.
That was a huge thing for me because I was never a super social person. As crazy as that sounds, I was never, and I'm still not to this day. Like, I'm very much introvert as I am. I'm an extrovert and an introvert. I'm kind of like both, but I'm more introverted than I am extrovert.
You're an ambivert.
Yeah, it's kind of like I'm a little more like that. So I enjoy my time. I need breaks from people, from my own mental health, because I absorb a lot of people's energy.
Absolutely.
If that makes sense. Like, I have very solid intuition, and I can pick up on people's vibes immediately. So,
You're
one
an empath.
was absolutely, absolutely. And I can say to people that the first thing you have to do is change the people that you're around, because you cannot believe in your mind that you can be a recovering addict and hang out with all of your addict friends and think that you're going to stay clean, because it's never going to happen. It's a lie, and you know it is. You know, I mean, I understand that. I'm not saying you have to turn your back on your friends, but some people need distance. I'm that kind of person. Like, I needed to pick up and completely move myself. Not everybody has that mean. You know what I mean? Like, not everybody has that opportunity. But you need to change the people you're around. And then, like, for me, it was finding things that I enjoyed doing. Like, music has always been a huge part of my life. I've always, like, writing has always been a big part of my life. Photography, things that I enjoy doing, I started doing again because I forgot that you know what I mean? Like, I forgot that I enjoyed them because I hadn't done them in so long. Yeah, and like the whole time that you're an addict, right? You're an addict. You don't have pleasure in it. Well, I'll tell you, when I first started getting clean, and it's so crazy. When you start getting clean in the beginning, all of your senses are incredibly heightened. Your sense of smell, emotions are all over the place. It's a very normal thing, but it happens, and sometimes it can be extremely overwhelming because colors are brighter. Emotions are 10 times stronger. Everything is different because for the first time, it's like you're doing these things, seeing these things, tasting these things again for the first time. Because you don't have any of that when you're addicted. So I just decided that, like, I wanted to start finding things I enjoy doing in life. And it kind of, just the way it worked out was that it almost felt like I was doing things for the first time again. like, I found beauty in things that I took for granted, and while I was addicted, I found the joy in things that I didn't have joy in for years. And I had
Amazing.
I had to kind of like retrain myself to go down the path I wanted to be on. You know, like it wasn't going to come to me and knock on my door. I had to find it. And it's trial and error.
Absolutely.
Did everything I did work? No. My faith got incredibly strong. You know, my faith in God, I like tarot cards, things like that's stuff that I enjoy. That's not for everybody, but that's what I enjoy. And it just keeps my mind and my spirit like in a good place. Do I have bad days?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. They're very few and far between now. In the beginning,
thank God,
they were more bad than good. But then it changes, and it does change, even though it feels like, and at the time, like it's never going to get better. It does.
That's such a great message to send. Like, it does get better, but you have to work on it, and you have to find the things you love and distract yourself. If you're getting the itch, submerge yourself in something creative or something you enjoy. It's so important to stay busy and find the things that you love, the things that work for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I remember that, like, for in the beginning, like, I remember there would be, like I said, I was inside, and I kind of locked myself in my house for a while. And during those times, I would watch, like, so many different kinds of, like, inspirational videos on YouTube, things that motivated me. You know what I mean? Like, I would listen to music that motivated me, you know, and little by little, like, my spirit started to come back. And
it's
that was
amazing
where,
when
like, that was the turning point.
You raise your vibration, and once you do that, you start to attract more things that raise your vibration. It's the same as when you get stuck in a really negative space. You end up attracting more and more negative experiences, and it's not your fault. It's just that's your energy is vibrating at a very low frequency. And so
absolutely, you're attracting everything that's at a low frequency. Absolutely.
Exactly. So
and I didn't understand that for a long time.
No, and most people don't until they go through something like this, and unfortunately have to go through the healing process and have to find the things that work for them. And then sometimes it's only looking back that you realize, wow, I did all of these things to raise my vibration, to make me happy just in that moment, but that ultimately led me to a happier everything. And it is a process, and it doesn't happen overnight. But the point is, like, when you're not doing anything to raise your vibration, you're going to stay stuck. You know, so that's why 100%. I always promote. Yeah, I even promote, meditation a lot, just because I know how that can raise your vibration. But also, like, binaural beats, they change your actual frequency by listening to them. It's a physiological response. So,
and and they always say that, like, music is like a universal language, because it really is. Music has an ability to touch people in a way that nothing else can, and there's a reason for that.
Absolutely.
Like, and I will, like, the one thing I will tell people, and anybody that's struggling, whether you're still in addiction or you're just in recovery or you've been clean for years, I promise you, as soon as you get right with yourself and you understand who you are and you accept that, everything will change. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's a brutal process. It's a lot of self-reflection. It's a lot of confrontation on issues with yourself that you didn't want to, like, open again. You don't want to reopen those wounds again. But honestly, when you get past that and you heal from those things, what happens to you is incredible. It's so worth it.
That's an amazing message. So basically, you're telling people yeah, is it going to suck when you're reopening the wounds? Yes. But you do that and it's intense maybe in the moment while you're doing all that, but the outcome is you get to live the rest of your life happier. So it's like you go through the hard stuff for a little while to enjoy the rest of your life as a more balanced, healthier, happier person. So it sucks, yeah, but it's worth it in the end. So I love that.
My life now, my life today is totally different. Like, my whole life changed. And who I am today and who I was even 6 months ago are so far apart and so different. And, like, I'm doing things today that I didn't even think were possible a year ago.
That's incredible.
Like, career-wise, emotionally, mentally, physically, all of these things come hand in hand. And it like, if I didn't live through all of this, I would doubt it. But I'm living proof that it's real, that you can come out of it. There is a light at the end of that tunnel. You just have to push through it. And it sucks,
right?
But it's worth it.
That's amazing.
And I'm a huge advocate, just so people know this, I'm a huge cannabis advocate. Like, that's the other thing that helped me tremendously. Like, absolutely. I'm involved in the medical cannabis industry now, as well as what I do, career-wise. That's the other career that I'm in at the moment. I mean, I'm not going to go into too much detail about that because it's still being built. But honestly, that changed for me place of the opiates. I would rather be high on bud than I would today want to be high on heroin.
So this is an interesting point that you bring up because I've had this conversation with a few different people, and there are a lot of addicts who, specifically opiate addicts, who don't like smoking anymore because it's not enough for them. It doesn't do anything to them. But then there's others like yourself that feel that was the part of the healing process, was being able to turn to something more natural, you know what I mean, like to get them through the anxiety, obviously the right strains or, this and that.
Right.
But basically,
and that's why.
Yeah, but there are some who they used to like to smoke and then they became addicted to opiates, and then after the opiate addiction, it just, they don't have any desire for it. But I do feel that there are other alternatives, like products from the plant,
like
that
CBD,
could help
stuff like that.
More so, maybe, or even just the oil. You know what I mean? Like, because I don't know, some of them just say it doesn't do anything to them to smoke it. So I know that a lot of the medical community is using the oil to help them with their anxiety. It's a heavier, like a more of a body buzz feeling.
Okay, so I'll say, like, as far as this situation, like how this works for me. All right, so because of my injury, I deal with chronic pain, like horrible back pain. And I also have multiple sclerosis. I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 2009, right after I left the police department. So pain has become a natural part of my life, and I refuse to take any kind of pain medication. So for me,
makes sense.
Yeah. So for me, medical cannabis. Okay, so I know a lot of people bud on the street, like, and I get that. Listen, I don't care how you get bud, whatever.
I'm not promoting that, obviously, because it's illegal. But if you're getting it medically, then yes, I have to say that.
Yeah. Okay. So just so people understand, this is why I'm saying this. I am more of a fan of medical than I am of street bud, and there's a reason. certain
Mhm.
strands are for certain things. And if you're someone that needs, like for me, like insomnia, pain, certain strands for me meet those needs. They fill those voids for me. They ease the pain. They ease the anxiety. They help me sleep. I know in a medical shop, in a dispensary, what I'm getting, what strain I'm getting, and what it's for.
Right.
You don't have that selection on the street. You're
No,
getting
you need
it from your dealer.
Situation. Yeah.
Right. So that plays a part in it, and I think that if people went the direction of medical, getting a card and getting it through a dispensary, and getting the strands that are conducive with your ailments and your issues,
symptoms. Yeah.
right, you're going to have a better outcome than getting it from your dealer on the street who gets 2 strands, and they're probably good. I'm not saying they're not, but they may be good, but not for what you have.
Right.
So
and also,
that's why.
Unfortunately, in some states, it's not legal yet to even do that. So that's a problem for some people. But yeah, it looks like it's going in that direction
everywhere.
But in the meantime, guys, use whatever's legal in your state.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
CBD
I'm not.
Legal.
Make that clear. I'm not condoning
going
out on the street and buying drugs at all.
No, of course.
But medical
I
cannabis
has
helped me.
I know. Yes, and I know a lady who does work at a dispensary for a doctor, and it's medical, and she's told me about all the different strains that help with, like you said, different symptoms, different ailments. So, yeah, it's very, very effective if you can get it in your state.
And some people get that from CBD. And CBD is legal everywhere.
Yes, I personally love CBD. I don't for me, I prefer that because I don't want to feel high per se. But I do really enjoy CBD. It takes my anxiety away because I do get anxiety from time to time. But it's not enough for everybody, and I understand that.
Right, and it's not. Like, everybody's different, and that's where it comes in that you have to know yourself. You know what I mean? And what works for me isn't going to work for everybody. You know what I mean? Like, we're all different, and whatever works for you is what you should do. Like, just because it worked for me does not mean that it's not like a one-size-fits-all thing. It doesn't work that way.
No,
I just know that it helped me.
Yeah. Look, whatever helps
worth a shot for people where it is legal. You know what I mean? It's worth the shot. If it doesn't work for you, then go a different route because there's 100 different avenues.
There's like we were saying, there's medical, there's CBD, there's also, medical marijuana, not medical, not pills.
Right. Yeah. No. Medical. I understand what you're saying.
Right, and there's also other things that you can do which take a lot of work, but there's meditation, there's hypnosis, there's NLP.
Yep.
There's so many things you can do in combination with those things. But I'm a big believer just in even essential oils, herbs. There's so many different
aromatherapy,
herbs,
all that stuff.
Herb. Not just the
like oils, essential oils.
All kinds of herbs,
absolutely.
Exactly. But
absolutely. And honestly too, I will say this because I know people that are just starting to go through recovery, your body has gone through a whole bunch of shit. You know what I mean? Your body you're exhausted physically, mentally, emotionally. Your body doesn't have the endorphins that it had when you were using. So one thing I will tell people is that working out, even walking, that will rebuild the endorphins twice as fast.
I was going to ask you that. Have you incorporated a certain amount of physical activity? Because for me, that's one of the best highs that I get. I'm not going to lie. When I work out like a maniac, or even when I do yoga, but I usually like to work out intensively, like I do kickboxing and boxing. Not lately because I'm trapped in the house, but you know what I mean. I like intense workouts.
I know.
I literally feel high after that. It's all the
Yeah,
high I need. I'm like, yes.
absolutely. And
Mm-hmm.
that I'm a huge advocate of that as well, because that will build, and your brain and your body will produce the dopamine that you aren't getting naturally. Like, and even if that includes walking, being in the sun, like all of these things sound trivial, but they play a huge part because your body is so depleted from everything that's been in it and how much it's not done naturally that you have to rebuild
Mm-hmm.
that. So, like,
Yeah.
getting out there and moving around and getting some sunlight and, like, walking and then working out or things like that, like, build it up slowly, but it'll build it quicker than if you did nothing.
Absolutely. Releasing endorphins by exercise
Yeah.
is one of
Yeah,
the
your body
best
hasn't had
things you can
endorphins
do.
for a long time.
Sunlight. Yeah, like you said,
Yeah, some
sunlight
vitamin
too. If you
D.
can. Mhm. Exactly. What are some of the other things that you do now on a regular basis to lift your vibration, just to stay in a positive, mindset or feeling?
Okay, so over the last 3 months, so prior to this, I mean, I love yoga, I love meditation. Those things I think are important, not just for the physical aspects of it, but like you're going to be with yourself the rest of your life. And no matter where you go, you take yourself with you. So until you get comfortable with who you are, everything is going to be a struggle. To me and for me, yoga and meditation are two things that help me kind of stay balanced. And then the last 3 months, I started getting into crystals, essential oils, yoga more than I was now. Music. Music plays a big part in my life. I'm building a podcast, so that's happening.
Excellent. So happy
Yeah,
about that.
I'm excited. I'm definitely excited. And I'll have that information hopefully in the next week where I'll be able to kind of put that information out there.
Excellent.
So those are
Do
things,
you have a name
it's creative.
so that do you have a
No,
name
I
picked out so that people can find you? I was gonna say. So how can our audience now find you? Do you want to
no.
direct them
Well,
to
I'm on Facebook.
Facebook or?
I'm on Facebook right
Okay, so they
now.
could.
Yeah, Elisa Michelle, 1L.
Okay, so they could. That way they can find your podcast when it comes out in a week. Because
Right.
usually, if I have friends who podcast, we announce all that. But since you haven't, you don't have the name yet, they can find you on Elisa Michelle Facebook, and of course, you'll have
Yeah,
everything posted there. Yeah.
I
Okay,
will.
so
And
back
I
to
also
this.
have Instagram too. So
Okay, perfect. You can tell them we'll announce that once more before we say goodbye, but we still have quite a bit more time. So let's continue hearing the things that you do to stay happy.
okay.
So music, your podcast, that's huge. Because
Yeah.
helping
I
other
started.
people.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I started.
Yeah.
Okay, so recently my tarot cards. I started doing that,
Great.
which I know that's not for everybody. Not everybody believes in
I
that,
love
but
it. I
yeah.
yeah.
I like all that.
I do it.
It's entertaining, and it's a good way to connect with yourself more than anything else.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Spiritual
I
guidance.
honestly, and my faith plays a huge part in what I do now. I'm not someone that shoves religion down people's throats. I don't believe in that. Like, it's not my job to prove to you anything. This is what I do. And whatever works for other people, I support 100%.
Right.
I work a lot, so I have that going on. I'm trying to think what else. Oh, I'm out a lot. Like, I'm a nature kind of person. So, like, kayaking, love that. Photography, I get out, I take a lot of pictures of, like, nature, and I'm a huge person of astrology. So I like.
Me too.
Yeah, and like now I'm in Florida, and it's crazy because the skies here right now are so clear at night that Venus, the planet, is like so bright. I put pictures on my Facebook recently, and you can see the constellations and everything, and it's really hot down here right now. It's like in the 70s and 80s. Last week was the 90s. So I know not everybody up north and stuff are in that weather yet, but I get out as much as I can.
Right.
I do.
That's so important, getting out. Yeah.
I do. I get
back
out.
To astrology. back to astrology and tarot cards. You're a Scorpio, right?
I am, to a T, but
yeah.
I'm a cusp. See? I'm a cusp baby.
Are you? Cusp
you know
of?
Yes.
I'm a cusp too. Are
you?
Yeah, I'm Sag. I'm a Sagittarius, but I'm a Scorpio cusp.
So, really? Because I'm a Scorpio Sag cusp too. I'm November 20th.
I'm the 22nd.
Really?
Wow.
Yep. How did I not know this?
So, I don't know. I don't know how I didn't know that about you either, but both of my kids are Scorpio, so I have a lot of experience with Scorpio, but so I'm very Sagittarius, I'm not going to lie, but my intuition and the interest that I have in the spirit world are definitely my Scorpio cusp side. So
that's me, yeah.
It's natural for you to be drawn to those things as a Scorpio because, like I said, both of my sons are Scorpio. And they've always been interested in that, like, spirit world, just the
intuition, very, very strong intuition.
You know, yeah. So
we're very passionate people.
But yeah, that's true, very true. Yep, I'm very Sag, like I said, but I do have that other side, because I'm a cusp. It's funny too because my other son is he's born the day before me. He's November 21st.
so we're all 3 days.
Yeah, and my other son is November
there.
12th. Yeah, yep, exactly.
Scorpios are not easy to raise. I give you credit.
Well,
we are
they're
not
boys,
easy.
and because they're very loving. They're very, very deep and very old soul, very loving, you know. So I'm lucky, but they can be very stubborn as well.
Yeah, that we are. That is a quality we have. That's not always great. We are very hard-headed.
I can't say that I'm not, so. Yeah, I can relate.
Yeah.
I'm not judging.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I enjoy that stuff, though. I mean, for me, like, I'm doing a podcast coming up with a friend of mine that has a channel on, like, on UFOs and, like, paranormal phenomenon, things like that. I'm totally into that. I love that stuff. And so I research that a lot. I do a lot of research on that stuff.
That's amazing. So a friend of mine who was on the show the other day, he's heavily into that stuff too. He even does ghost hunting. So I've gone ghost hunting with him before. He has the machines and everything.
Fun.
Like, yeah, really. We were in a cemetery. We were like, it was fun. But he also has a podcast. I believe it's a podcast. Yes, it is a podcast on those topics as well. So I'll send you that just because I think, it's interesting and you're doing something similar. So it's always nice to be in touch with other people who are doing similar things, right? So I had him on the show because he was actually – oh, go ahead. Sorry.
You're good. No, I was just going to say, like, my only thing with the paranormal phenomenon is you have to be incredibly careful because a lot of people, like, the one thing I do not promote, and I tell people this all the time, please don't play with Ouija boards.
Yeah,
people think that they're just a kid's
opening
game.
Up that.
So dangerous. Like, and it's more negative. Yes, it's more negative entities you're going to communicate than you are with positive. And negative entities have a thing with trying to manipulate.
Well,
so
an interesting
that's my only
thing
thing.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I love that you're saying that because it just brings me to an interesting topic. So they say there's some theories that when you weaken your energy field with substances, when you're an addict or even an alcoholic, you're susceptible to negative entities attaching themselves to you. So I always
That's
thought that was
true.
an
Yes.
interesting theory. Yeah.
That is. I
And
think that's
trust
true.
me, I do too. And I speak from experience. I'm not perfect, and I've had my own struggles with different types of, I've had my own addictions, things that I've
Right.
had to work on as well over the years. And yeah, you can see, just how people deteriorate. I mean, I know it's the brain, it's the body, but it's also the energy field. So it's a little bit of a paranormal topic, obviously, but I could
Yeah.
see, like, it makes sense. It just makes sense. But
Yeah,
it's
because
funny that you also
if you put it
bring
into
up.
perspective,
Mhm.
if you put that into
Yeah.
perspective, like what you're saying, is that like if you think about it in this way, when you're in that when you're at that point in your life, you're at your most vulnerable, like spiritually.
Yeah.
Like you don't have the willpower to like people always say that the devil's best trick was to make people believe he didn't exist. And negative entities have a tendency to gravitate to people that are in vulnerable situations because they can manipulate that situation through temptation. So,
Yeah.
a lot of
Exactly.
times when you're susceptible to that. So I believe that's very possible.
Right. That was my feeling too. I think that's impossible to prove, right? But like
Right.
sometimes things just resonate with you, and that was one of those things that just kind of like resonated with me, and it stayed with me, in my mind. So I thought it was interesting. But
It's always a fun
there's
topic.
another topic. It's a fun topic.
We'll have to do a podcast on that one day together.
You know what? I'm totally down. Totally down. I always do a prayer, like a meditation, before I do a reading for somebody as well, like a tarot reading.
Like to ground yourself?
Even for yeah, a protection. So I do a lot of meditation, and, some would call them rituals, but they're basically just protection rituals, and I do them for my loved ones. I do them for the planet. I do them for myself. I do a lot where I surround myself in white light. It's called the Divine Light Invocation. There's one like that, where you see you literally absorb the protective light that it's, you carry it within you. And it's funny because I think I told this story recently, but I have a girl here who's a good friend of mine. She's a fantastic massage therapist, but she also does energy work. She doesn't really
like
call
chakra?
it Reiki, but I think it's like Reiki, but they don't call it that. It's just a natural kind of gift that she has. And I was doing so many of these protection rituals, meditations actually. So yeah, like, because I find that, like how you were saying before, being such an empathetic person, I absorb a lot of energies from other people. So I always have to make sure that I'm protecting myself as much as I can, even though it's still really hard because I'm still really sensitive to other people's energy. But when I do those, I do feel stronger because it's something I'm intentional and focused on. So she was massaging me the one day, and she's like, I don't know what it is, but I feel like you're not letting me help you. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, there's something that's not, like, there's something about
like
you that's
block?
like rejecting my energy. I'm like, oh, it's because I've been meditating and doing the protection spell from anybody's energy, not just bad, but all, like, just to have my own energy, right? So I could not believe that this girl picked up on that. I was like, wow.
Yeah,
Shows you
I believe it.
Energy, right?
I believe it.
So,
because honestly, if you think about it in an aspect that's not even like a paranormal aspect or anything like that, like most people can pick up on other people's vibes, and it's the same thing. It's vibes or energy, and when somebody's shady, you can pick that up. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and like,
especially us
and
Scorpio.
yeah, it's very hard to get one past us. But yeah, you'd have to protect yourself from that because negative energy, negative people will bring you down faster than anything else.
Which brings me to another question I have for you. This is something that I've experienced myself, and I know how negatively certain things can impact me and push me back towards unhealthy habits. So, for example, if you're around if you were around somebody who you sensed was, you know, sexually abusive or abusive in general after the things that you've gone through, right? Do you feel
Right.
that would weaken you to a point of being susceptible to using again? Or are you past that point in your journey where you're strong enough to understand what's happening? Like if you found yourself in another situation like that.
Okay, so yes and no. One thing I will say is now where I'm at mentally and like emotionally, I know immediately from within the first 10, 15 minutes of a conversation if someone like is if something about them is off. And when it comes to this like sexual assault kind of aspect of it, I immediately like it's almost like my mind and my body completely reject it. Like as crazy as it might sound, I get like I'll feel sick, like physically sick. And that right there is enough to tell me to get away. Now, there have been instances where I have known people for a long period of time that I am able to kind of balance that out. But I've learned in my recovery that you can't open yourself up to those situations so blindly, because 9 out of 10 times it's going to end in a situation that's going to put you in a spot that you don't want to be in. So I think that because I've had these experiences, and even like to the point when I've had the relapse, like that one relapse was enough to like smack me back into reality. Like to know that I can't even take that chance. So if you know what I mean? Like, so if I even think that something in you is in that direction where you're either using drugs or you're getting high, I will not even allow myself to be in a situation that I have to make that choice. Because to me, it happened so fast the last time that I know I didn't know it was going to happen. You know what I mean? So now I don't even allow it to creep up on me.
Right.
And that's just comes, you know what I mean? Like that comes in time.
And experience, trial and error.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
Absolutely.
I feel
like
I
said,
so
when that happened. Sorry, I apologize. Like I said, when that happened to me, when I had the relapse, up until like right before I got high, I did not see that coming a mile away. Like, like I said, if you would have told me it was going to happen, I would have said you were crazy. But it happened that fast. So now I know from that. You know what I mean? Like now I learned.
Yeah.
So now I don't even I can't even deal with it.
It's the same for people who've had PTSD and then they're around somebody who is doing something to them like the person did who gave them PTSD in the first place. It's like a downward spiral immediately.
Right.
So it's always, even with addicts, like, of course, you're around, again, what was your downfall in the first place with the addiction. So it can happen so fast before you even know it. And you don't think that it can happen, but it does, and it probably will. So I always try to encourage people, like you said, to change their environment, change the people that, you know, trigger them in a negative way, or that they know is going to trigger addiction, or, you know, people who use, or people who are going to trigger their PTSD, any of these things that brings them backwards. But here's the challenge. Not everybody has the choice. Like, you know, some of us are lucky that we can say, well, I'm not going to deal with this person. I'm not going to deal with that person because.
But what
they
happens
put me
when
in
it's like a family
unhealthy.
member?
Yes. So
yeah, no, absolutely.
So this is my question. Like, what do people do who cannot avoid people who are unhealthy for them? It must be so much harder.
Okay, so this is what I would say to that, because I've dealt with this. I will tell you that just because, listen, I understand family better than a lot of people, so I get that, and I know how hard that is when you have someone that is toxic, that is immediately in your proximity, and it's very hard to avoid them. But what I will say is that toxic is toxic, no matter who it is. And
absolutely,
you know what I mean? Like, you have to love yourself and your mental stability and your peace of mind more than you don't owe anybody anything. And if someone is toxic to you and is someone that puts you in a place that is a negative space, you have to cut that cord because it will cost you your life. Like, the thing with addicts is that that's a life or death. It's not like, you're going to go around somebody, have a bad day, and go home and cry on your pillow and call it a day. Addicts have a chance of relapsing every time they're in a bad space. So you have to want to have peace more than you want to appease people. And if you have to cut off your toxic ass sister, so be it. Because your mental health and your life is worth more than that. And I know it's not easy. It's not. But nothing in recovery is easy.
No. I feel the same way. It's like you really have to avoid anybody who's bringing you backwards on your progress because,
right,
like you said, toxic is toxic. And usually a toxic person is pretty much toxic to most people around. I hate to say it, but it's true.
Yeah.
Like, a toxic person isn't usually just toxic to one person. They're toxic to a lot of people. Not always, but most of the time.
But a majority.
You know when somebody's toxic for you. It doesn't even matter. Like, that's, not that it doesn't matter, but if they're toxic to other people, that's their problem with those people. But if they're toxic to you, because when somebody negatively impacts you emotionally or mentally or any type of way. It's toxicity. So even if you haven't been an addict, you got to get away from that because it's unhealthy and it does damage. But especially if you struggle through addiction and you got clean, so important to just much as possible.
It's funny that you brought that up because there's this like not an influencer. He's actually a multimillionaire, and he does a lot of like public speaking. And this guy's name's Gary Vaynerchuk, or Gary V, and he does a lot of podcasts, like actual like live record. Like, you can watch him on YouTube. He talks about.
He's actually friends with one of my friends. Darren Prince, he's an opiate advocate. Him and Gary V are actually really good friends. So they're together a lot, actually.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's another story. Okay, so Gary talks about this, and I've seen a lot of his stuff. I might have seen it.
Yes, he talks about this.
So what does he say?
He talks about how, like, a lot of times when people are trying to like make their lives and they're trying to like expand their life and become something and goals and like succeed, there's always something holding them back. And it's typically like your mom, your dad, your cousin, your brother. And he's like, fuck them. Because in the end of the day, when they're gone, you still have to live with the choices you made. So, like, that resonated with me. Because there's always going to be somebody close to you that doesn't typically or may not support you in your choices and, like, your dreams, your aspirations. But, like, if you spend your time appeasing those people, there's going to come a day that those people aren't there anymore. And then what do you have? Your coulda, shoulda, woulda.
Absolutely.
And it's not going to matter.
Exactly. No.
So, like, I'm a huge believer in that. And, like, people that will listen that don't know who he is, you should definitely go check him out on YouTube. His name is Gary V, V-E-E. He's got a lot of great content. He's so real. He doesn't, like, sugarcoat it or anything. And he's somebody I watched a lot when I was going through recovery.
He's amazing. I discovered him, I think,
great.
just a couple years ago. Yeah.
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 You know, when he started,
blew up in the last couple years.
He's a multi-millionaire, but he started with nothing. He was working in his father owns a wine business. His family owns a wine company. And he built his father's wine company from like $30,000 a year to like $500 million, and then walked away with nothing and built his own empire.
Amazing.
From nothing. Super guy. He's got a lot of good content, so I highly recommend him. Just for like,
I agree.
You know what I mean? Like, just for inspiration and like someone that's going to be real.
Definitely. He really gives it to you straight too. He's almost like he almost comes. You might even think he's kind of coming off like not rude,
arrogant,
but like in your face about it until you see where he's going with something, and then you're like, wow, he's just right. That's all.
Yeah, because he's real. Because he's real.
Accurate.
Because he says that the worst thing, the worst thing he feels for people is like someone that ends up. He said to me, or he said on the he said on the podcast on the thing that I was watching. He said, the graveyard is full of dreamers, and if you ask anyone on their deathbed what if they live their life, they'll give you a list of things they wish they did and didn't do. He said, I don't want anybody to ever have to be in that place where you're 80 years old on your deathbed and thinking about all the things you wish you would have done and didn't do because of this and that and this person and that person.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have this one life and that's it, and it's not long. It's quite short.
It is. It goes by fast.
It does. Sure does.
And I think that's so important. Another good point that you bring up, and I'm going to relate this to addiction, because I feel like sometimes even I don't want to say it. I don't want to sound, okay, I'm going to say it. Sometimes an addict, it's not enough that they have a family or kids to stay clean. It's
right.
Not that their kids aren't everything to them and so important and everything to them. You know what I mean? But I feel like there's something more that needs to happen for a person as an individual, and that's having a purpose. Like, your journey led you to sharing your story now because you're in a healed place, in a very healed place. And I'm not saying you're completely healed, and I don't think none of us are ever completely healed, but you're in such a healed place now that you have a happy and healthy life. Like you said, of course you have bad days, but now you're sharing your story, and now you're starting your own podcast. That's a huge step in the direction of your legacy, which is so much more than going to work and getting, and feeling like that's all amazing too. Like, we all want to feel productive and successful and feel good about ourselves, but you're even taking it a step beyond with like having a purpose and creating like kind of like a legacy for yourself. And I think that's so important with people who've moved through addiction and they get to a certain point where they are healthy and more balanced again, is that desire to have a purpose. And I think that helps them stay clean.
Yeah. I agree. And like, I say this now that I have gone through what I've gone through and where I'm at today. that I honestly believe that all of the things I've been through were meant to happen the way they did. Because
Wow.
I knew for many years, I always felt like there was a reason that I was going through what I was going through. Like, I may not have known at the time what it was, but I knew in the end that nobody goes through the amount of trauma and things that I've gone through for no reason. And if what I'm doing, you know what I mean? Like, if what I'm doing or my situation or my story shows one person that they can do the same thing, then it was worth it. And I would do it again. I would go through everything all over again. And I wholeheartedly feel that way.
That says a lot to where you're at now, especially.
It was worth it. I mean, like, there were days that I didn't want to live anymore. And there were days that I didn't think it was ever going to change or I was ever going to be anything more than what I was.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a lot of work. But to be where I am today was worth every single ounce of pain and trauma I went through. Because I wouldn't be even remotely close to who I am right now.
Like, so floored at where you're at now and the stuff that you have been through. When you first started telling me about it, I had no idea, right? And I was just like, are you kidding me? Like, it's just crazy the things that people have gone through and you have no idea. Nobody, you know what I mean? Like, I would have never known that. You don't know.
You don't know people's stories.
Right. And to see where you're at now after going through so much trauma, from the assault and the stalking to losing your brother to having your own addiction. I mean, it's just amazing how resilient human beings can be if they choose it and put in the work, you know?
And there's nothing, and just so people understand, like, there is nothing about me that is superhuman or extraordinary or massively different. Like, I am just like everybody else. I just made the choices that mattered to me. Like, I didn't want to leave this earth being a junkie. Like, to me, that wasn't acceptable. Like, I was worth more than that, and I knew that I was worth more than that, and I wanted to be more than that. So for me, I turned every ounce of pain, anguish, trauma into motivation to prove everybody wrong that thought that that was all I ever would be. Like, that was such a huge factor in me succeeding because I have a lot of pride. And for me, it was not okay to say, oh, yeah, I know her. She's nothing but a junkie, and that's all she'll ever be. I'm not okay with that because I know that I was more than that.
Good.
And I think that goes for anybody. Like, you don't have to be who people think you are.
So the reverend who has that house I was telling you, who deals with addicts and suicidal individuals, one of the most common denominators amongst suicidal people and addicts was that they don't feel that they're worth anything.
Worthy.
They feel completely
they don't feel worthy.
Worthless. And so
they're not. That's not true.
And they're not, exactly. So the most beautiful thing that they do at this house, right? They have a few houses, but basically when they come to the home, they are told day in and day out with eye contact, like, you are loved like a father, like a son, like a, whatever. You are loved unconditionally. It doesn't matter what you've done. I don't care what you've done. I love you anyway, and you're worthy. And it's just this whole process of that. They take them and they shift their whole environment, literally, and make them feel that sense of connection and unconditional love, which unfortunately I think a lot of people just haven't grown up with, and they don't know what it's like to feel loved unconditionally. I'm not saying every addict has come from an unloving family. That's absolutely not true. I think trauma and other things trigger addiction as well. But
Right.
you know
I came from, my family loved me. I'm the
yeah,
prime example of
exactly.
that.
Yeah, and like
But
I know
9 times
many.
out of 10, it's not like that.
Right, and I know many people who come from loving families where they are loved unconditionally, but they've gone through some other type of trauma that triggered their addiction.
Right.
So, like, definitely not saying, but the majority of the cases, for whatever reason, is that these people feel worthless and that they're pointless in life. So,
And
rebuilding that is huge.
huge. It's so huge. And I'm going to say, I will say this to people that have struggled or are struggling in addiction. Addiction is a very tricky thing. And one of the things about, and a lot of people may not know or understand this, but addiction, your brain is extremely powerful. Your brain does not favor change well. And when your brain gets comfortable, it does not want to come out of that comfort zone. And that's the tricky part of addiction, because your brain will trick you to believe that you need that drug so much to survive and to feel normal that it will convince you that you have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And until you can take control of that and understand that you are more powerful than you believe, and that if you can change the way that you see it and understand that, no, I don't need to do this. This is just my brain playing tricks on me to get high.
Yeah.
It will change everything.
That's a good point. Do you feel like if people in general, were more educated on psychology and even just the way that the brain works, and energy, would they possibly be able to cope with staying clean better? Because I feel like that's one of the hardest things is after using, a lot of, unfortunately, most people do relapse from opiates. It's just a fact. So
right.
I feel like, you probably have a lot more insight to that than I would. And I would love to hear your opinion. Like, how important was that education for you?
So what made me understand addiction was I would research how our brain and addiction with each other. And what I researched and learned was that, and which I never knew, was the main job of our brain is to process algorithms. Everything about what we do, what we see, hear, touch, say, everything is algorithms in our brain. And the main job of your brain is to protect the body. So if your brain feels or even has an inclination that your body is in harm's way or danger, it will do things to stop you from doing what it thinks is going to hurt you. So even if it's something as simple as people are like afraid of heights. Fear of heights is not just a phobia. That is your brain processing an algorithm that is telling it's processing it that if you fall from where you are, you will die. So it creates such an immense amount of chemicals in your body that creates fear to make you not do what you're doing. It's the same thing with addiction. Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing with addiction. When your brain has gotten comfortable and it thinks that it has the endorphins because the opioids have attached to the receptors, so it believes that it made enough endorphins this whole time. And the reality is that it didn't make any. So when you change that pattern and you take it out of the comfort of not feeling anything and being okay, its automatic response is to make you feel uncomfortable, to make you put yourself back in the comfort level of where it thinks you should be. That's the tricky thing about addiction, is that what's happening is not the drug. It's the chemical imbalance of the brain.
Right. So important.
And it's so important. Absolutely. If people would research how it works and how addiction affects the chemical in the brain, they would understand better when the brain is playing tricks. Like, people, is it for something, even if it's as like, okay, prime example too is that people, I don't know if you are aware of this, but if you are going to pass out, like if you're going to faint, do you know that your body falls in the position to make your hands and limbs hit the ground before your head to protect your brain?
I had no idea. I've never heard that before. That's so interesting.
Yeah, look, I swear, look it up. It's real. That is because, like, when you sleep and your body functions while you're sleeping, you're not telling yourself to breathe every day. You're not telling your lungs, your heart to pound, or, you know, your intestines to process. You're not saying anything. You're not in control of that. That's your brain. It does it subconsciously.
Mm-hmm.
Just like that, it's the same with addiction. It's the same with the fight or flight response. When your brain feels or thinks that there's a danger, or it's not doing what it wants you, you're not doing what it wants you to do, it's going to make you feel uncomfortable. That's why you get anxiety. That's why people's stomach gets upset when they're nervous, you know, like things like that. That's all chemicals released from the brain.
So it's interesting because obviously in hypnosis we learn certain, like we were discussing before, the neurotransmitters. Also the brain, if you had previous trauma that's unhealed, your brain will continue to seek out situations to prove the programming that was previously done to your subconscious to be true. Meaning, if you were abandoned as a child or anything like that, any trauma from childhood, let's say you were abandoned abandoned as a child, what happens is then you seek out relationships which are possibly where one person is, the person that you choose is emotionally unavailable, or you actually create the scenarios yourself without knowing that push the person away so that they abandon you, because your subconscious is always out to prove that its programming is true. Yes.
Right.
So if people and I feel like so many relationships and lives could be saved if they were just more educated on psychology and understand why they do the things they do or why they have the reactions that they do. You know, like you were just saying with the brain, you know, with addiction, if they could just understand, if they researched. So anyway, this is why we're on the show. So we can talk about it.
Listen, I'm glad I could talk about that, because it's really, it's honestly crucial to recovery, is to understand why we do what we do. And like you said, in an abandonment situation, you will create things like when someone is, like if you're used to being treated poorly and you're with somebody who treats you really well, you automatically think something is suspicious because you're so used to being treated poorly that you think that that's normal.
Yes. Yeah.
And until you realize that it's not normal.
That's another reaction. You're right. That's another common reaction.
You know what I mean? Like, you can't get out of situations and you can't change outcomes until you understand why it's happening.
Right, and all those unhealed traumas, when you have to, you have to recognize that we all have them, and there's no shame in facing that or admitting that to yourself or to anybody else, because we all have them. Nobody's life has been perfect. So the faster you can acknowledge that you have them and wonder why you're interfering with your own life and self-sabotaging yourself, you really just have to look at all of the different traumas that you face and realize that that's the driving force behind a lot of the addictions that happen, a lot of the failed relationships that happen, you know. And look, I'm not saying that I'm an expert at knowing how to do it. It's just that I'm
Right.
aware, and I know that I need to work on those things, and I have worked on a lot of those things. And we're all a work in progress. We're always working
Mhm.
on ourselves. We don't do it once and then be done. It doesn't work like that
Right.
either. It's like,
And knowing is honestly half the battle.
yes, being aware that exactly. Just being aware, and then after that, the more awareness you have, the more understanding you have, and the more you can heal those things and find the ways that are going to be beneficial to you to heal it, right? So,
Right. And the more you know, the faster you can recognize patterns.
yeah, absolutely.
Because we
How's
all
your mom?
have patterns.
Yeah. Your mom must be really proud of you, by the way, after everything you've gone through. Like, I know that you are really close with her. What does she say
Yeah.
now about your
Both of my
dad?
parents. I'm amazingly close with both. Even my dad now. Like, my dad and I, like I said, we had a kind of tumultuous relationship growing up. And, but my dad's a Vietnam vet. And he also suffers from PTSD from the Vietnam War. And
Oh, wow.
so he understands it. He
Okay.
understands it better than anybody.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
they're great. They're really, my parents are, listen, like I said, I am beyond blessed, and I know that. And I'm grateful to God for that I have two incredibly amazing parents. Like I said, we've had our ups and downs, but I can say that there hasn't ever been a time that I needed them and they weren't there. Now, I know everyone doesn't have that, and I wish everyone did have that. But if you have one of those parents, you're blessed.
Absolutely. I concur. I have both
Yeah,
of
I
mine
mean, my
still.
mom, she's great. They're great.
Oh, that's excellent. Um, I'm lucky that I have both of mine still as well. So they've just, there's very supportive, and I feel like there's nothing like that. So something to be appreciated and to remind yourself to appreciate. But
Yeah,
like you said, even if you have one, you're still blessed. So
absolutely. And for people that don't have either, if you find that in a best friend or a sister or a brother, it counts just as much. Like, what I mean?
definitely.
You got to find people that support you. That's so important in any kind of recovery, in any kind of trauma and healing. You have to find people that support you, because we can't do all of this alone.
I think that's huge, and I'm so glad you're bringing that up before we end this, because finding your tribe is so important. I've had to do that
So
as
important.
well. Yeah, like, there's some people, again, who you just don't mesh with. It's an energetic
Right.
mismatch, and there's always problems in those relationships because nothing flows, because you're on two different wavelengths.
Right.
Or the
Always
people,
drama and stuff.
right, and usually those are people who are either jealous of when you're doing well. If people aren't clapping for you when you're doing well, they need to go because they are not
I
happy
just
for
said something
you.
about that. I'm so
Yeah,
glad you
it's
just said that. I
true.
just talked about that.
It's absolutely true. I've been saying it for years, and I've had to delete a lot of people from my life over the years. I've lived in a couple of different countries, so it's okay. But like
Yeah,
some of my best friends
absolutely.
are the ones I grew up with, and I know they're solid. And then my other best friends I lived in Toronto for 10 years. There, a couple of them are there, and I have a couple here. But in the meantime, I crossed paths with a lot of people who did not have my best interests at heart. And
Absolutely.
like, what you were saying before about being able to feel that? Well, I felt
Right.
it from those people right away. I ignored it, though, because I wanted to see the best in
Right.
everybody and blah, blah, blah. Guess what?
Oh, yeah.
Trust your gut.
We've made those mistakes. Absolutely.
Yes.
And it's crazy because this is a pure example of that. And I said this today, earlier in the day. Okay, if you, I know a lot of people use social media. If you ever take a chance to realize and to look at this, and you'll see it for yourself. If you are having a bad day or whatever, or something bad or drama going on in your life, and you post a status about that on Facebook, say, you'll get 30 comments and 300 likes and hearts and this, that, and the other. You post how great you're doing, and how great your life is going career-wise, you're making money, and you watch, you have 5 likes and like 1 comment, because people do not always want to see you happy.
You're right. And there's another saying that says, don't tell people your problems, because 80% of them don't want to see you fail, and 20% don't give a shit.
Right.
So,
and it's the truth. Honestly, it's the truth.
But when you have the good ones, it just makes them stand out even more, because, like, I just recently connected with some amazing, really spiritual people. You know, I'm into that stuff. So I connect with other people who are on my wavelength. And I'm not saying we're better or it's just I vibe with them better. And they're so supportive of me and my work. And I just feel like I have this beautiful tribe of friendships and family, too, because I have a really amazing family. I'm really blessed that way. But what I'm saying is it's so easy to have them in my life, and vice versa. We just help each other. We just encourage each other. We just support each other in every single way possible. It's the best feeling ever. So, and vice versa, it makes the ones who you don't vibe with, who you can feel don't give it, like, have your best interest at heart, it just makes them stand out even more. So it's just important to have your support group, like you said.
So, all right, can you hear me, Ro?
I can.
Okay, so, like, now that you just said that, I just want to say this. Like, on that note, exactly. A long time ago, I watched a movie, a play of Tyler Perry's. And based on what you just said, he said something, and it has stuck with me for years. And he said that most people are like leaves. All they do is take from the tree and only give shade. When the seasons change, they wither and fall from the tree. Don't be angry with them. This is who they are. God put them in your life for just a season. Not everybody that you know, like your whole life, are meant to go on the journey with you. Like, some people are not intellectually or emotionally ready to go to the level that you're going to. And that's okay.
It is. It's their journey, and this is yours, right?
Right.
And that's that. Yeah, I love that.
I'll send you the quote.
Please do.
It was from Medea.
Medea. I think I remember
I love Medea.
The season part, but not the prior part to that. But not everybody's meant to, something about the season. Anyway, it's brilliant. I love it. I never heard the whole thing, and I can't wait to make it my cover. I can't wait to make it my cover photo on Facebook.
I'll send you the link. I'm going to send you the video. I'll send you the video to your thing. But, honestly, it's great. And it's so real. It's the truth.
That's amazing. It is the truth. Absolutely. Well, tell everybody again what your podcast is about so that they can look you up on Facebook or Instagram and find your podcast, since you don't have a name yet, but you will soon.
I will soon. I am getting that is in the works, and I will have that information out hopefully in the next week. But I'm going to be doing podcast, and it's going to be a lot about a lot of the stuff we talked about today, about trials and tribulations throughout life, a lot of traumas that we've gone through, addiction, and the roads to recovery. Not every road is the same. It's not all about recovery and addiction. It's going to touch base on it's just going to be a lot of life stuff, real stuff that people go through, and how we get through it, how we deal with it, situations, people. I'm going to have people come on that have gone through a lot of different things, and have them tell their stories, because everybody's path is different. And I think that, the more that you put people in a position on a platform that they can share how they've gone through things and what they've done and how it's affected them, you have a more chance of seeing that and having that impact, and having that be able to impact other people to help them get through shit that they're going through, because this is not an easy road. And like I said before, we can't all do it alone. Absolutely. So I'm going to have all that information. I'm going to put it on my Facebook. And like I said, my Facebook is Elisa, Elisa, Michelle, Michele. And, you can find me, add me, and I'll add you, and then I'll have all the information out hopefully this week.
Amazing. And you're going to have some paranormal topics as well, right?
Yes, I am. I'm going to
Yeah.
do some conspiracy theory stuff. I'm going to do some UFO stuff, some paranormal stuff. We're going to do a whole bunch of different stuff, so it's going to
That's
be fun.
amazing. That is going to be fun. I can't wait. That's so exciting. Well,
And I'll have to have you on.
Oh, I'm down whenever you want, and I would love to have you on again because there's so many topics we can talk about. And my concept is all about anything psychology related, anything spirituality related. So there's tons we can talk about, and like the whole grounding thing and crystals, as you said you were getting into. That's a whole other topic we could do.
Right.
It's interesting.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it more than you know.
Thank you for being on and sharing your story. It's intense, it's powerful, it's really inspiring, and, I'm so proud just as another fellow human being to know you from what you came from to where you're at now, and I'm absolutely positive that anybody listening to this today could just take away so much insight just based on what you went through and the ways that you got through it.
And if anybody is out there, like, honestly, if anybody's listening and they're in addiction and they're struggling and you don't, like, you're just, like, feel hopeless, please reach out to someone. Try and make it, your goal to try to, like, get some help and get through it, because I promise you there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's so worth it.
Even reach out to one of us as a first
step.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I'll guide as best I can.
Yeah, and I have groups of amazing people in recovery, and I can just guide them into the right direction. I'm not a doctor, obviously, but you've been through it, so you'd be a great guidance, And like I said, I have the contacts, so yes, absolutely.
Reach out. That's the first step. Reach out.
Reach out to somebody, whoever you feel the most comfortable with, but definitely reach out. I love that advice. Well, thanks for joining us today. And guys, don't forget to check out Elisa's page. Her podcast is going to be awesome. I 1,000% support it and definitely can't wait to be on as well. Talk about some more interesting things. But
awesome. I had fun and I appreciate it.
Thanks. You too. And guys, stay tuned for tomorrow. There's another episode with 2 different guests on A Billion Realities. And thanks for tuning in today. And Elisa, thanks again, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks. Good night.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us today on A Billion Realities. Please stay tuned for next Wednesday's show at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time or 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Take care, everyone.